a principal engineer in the device development team. I specialize as a SME in identity and identity management. Obviously, T-Mobile as a company knows how to identify your phone. You pick up the phone, you dial the phone, you know that call is going to go to the right bill. And a lot of what we've been trying to do over this last couple of years is move us past that and move towards identifying you as a person, right? Separate from your phone, being able to get you to identify into different applications. So let me walk through a couple of items here. First off, I'll give you a little bit of a background. What is it that's happening in the identity space? Why does T-Mobile think that we should be in this space? What's some of the drivers? And then I'll go into T-Mobile ID as a project. And so a lot of this information is new for the public, for those of you that are outside of T-Mobile today. And I'll end up with a bunch of information that you guys can contact if you want to build your apps to connect to T-Mobile. So first off, everybody's familiar with the password paradigm, right? You end up with the easy side of the scale where everybody's password is 1, 2, 3, or the opposite end of the scale where you have to have a capital letter, a lowercase letter, and a gerbil sound in order to get a password that'll work. Either one of those is painful, and your phone is a route out of this. On top of that, you've got challenges even within the industry. So even if you do set a good password, you've got websites out there that don't have great protections, right? And believe it or not, people reuse their passwords. I know everybody in this room has a unique password for every site they ever visit, but LinkedIn just had, what, 2 million of their passwords stolen last year? And all those passwords, sure enough, showed up on a whole bunch of other websites. And so being able to get past this legacy world where you're just trying to protect using old technologies, where we're trying to go, we want to be able to enable you to do more things, and as a carrier, offer that up to you as application developers, right? So you as application developers can now focus on just providing the service, offhand over to the operator. Obviously, we know how to authenticate users, we know how to authenticate devices, and give that paired information to you. And then being able to do that across an ecosystem. So why is it important to T-Mobile? Why have we invested in this technology? Obviously, we're trying to go beyond just your phone, just your device, just one SIM card. We want to get past thinking of you as a phone number and getting to think of you within an ecosystem. Because the reality is, you're starting to use tablets, you're starting to use SIM cards in your phones, you're starting to show up on a, you buy a tablet, you buy a phone, you want to be able to access the same services. It doesn't matter if you download an Android app or an iOS app or a Windows Phone app in one device or another device. You just want it to work seamlessly, right? And so we see ourselves as helping you guys facilitate that. And so we're building T-Mobile ID. It sounds very simple. Believe me, it gets complex fast. It is a connect version where you can use OAuth protocols, standard open source protocols, send users redirected through to our authentication service. We'll authenticate the user and connect them to a secure token that we'll hand back to you. And so the user experience, if they're launching your app, if they're launching another app, is they bounce through the authentication, right? So everybody's seen this before with their Facebook account or their Google account or their Twitter account. But we also want to hook this into the device. So users are also going to be signing into their device once. So when they walk out of that store, that brand new device, they're going to set up their account and they're good to go. So now you can bounce them through the authentication. They're already signed in and they'll come right into your app fully authenticated, regardless of which device they're on. So a couple of the technologies that we're rolling together, some of the features that you're going to see within this if you guys do decide to start integrating. So one of the first items I mentioned, we're trying to identify users, not phone lines. But we'll be able to return to you both that this is Bob, and Bob might have multiple phone numbers connected to his account. So we'll be able to return all that information to you. And then users as a email address now, when they leave T-Mobile, they'll still have their accounts. T-Mobile, for many of you, may be familiar, we've got multiple brands already. So we'll be able to have a common account regardless of if you leave T-Mobile and go over to GoSmart, or you go over to Walmart Family Mobile, or you come back to us 2 years later, that existing user account will still be there, and you can reconnect a device account back to that user account, and all your profile data, personalized information will still be available to us to share, and as developers, you'd still have access to that. User consents is a big part. A lot of the FTC and FCC guidelines coming up in the next 6 months are all about how we start providing a lot of the privacy controls that users are expecting, and being able to do that within a carrier environment. You know, when you log into using your Facebook account, you expect to control which apps have access to your account. Well, as a carrier, not only do we want to give you that control, but we also want to give you controls over what data you allow T-Mobile to use, or what data you allow to share to other friends. And then some of the other items, a lot of application developers in the past have had kind of a relationship with T-Mobile, right? So if you're a developer out there, you build an app, you find somebody in our marketing team, we sign a big contract, and you get a big pipe into our database, and you can basically query any user. And so what we're trying to do is go with more of an open source style. You guys will be able to just grab tokens, and with those tokens connect to just that single user, just the data they've exposed, instead of a big pipe where you can get access to anything and we trust you to keep it locked down. So it's a big modernization in the infrastructure that we're trying to implement here. Bring ourselves into the 2000s, if I could say. Some of the other features of importance, users can create their accounts from anywhere. So historically, I don't know how many of you guys have built apps on T-Mobile before, but today we use a system called Misden insertion for a lot of basic authentication. If you want to go and actually create a password with T-Mobile, today you have to go to our website. Well, we're a mobile company, so we're trying to fix that. Whether you're on your tablet or your phone, you're walking out of the store, you're online buying it at Amazon, no matter where you are, you set up that account the first time with your first interaction with T-Mobile, regardless of what device it was you were on. And so that'll transfer through. It should make it a lot easier as developers to work with us. All right. High-level timelines. So this month we're launching our alpha, or I should say next month, within a month. We're launching the alpha, so the first version of the service will be stood up. We're going to be piloting on some hidden sites to start with. My T-Mobile is going to be rolling out late summer, so everybody hitting My T-Mobile is going to start authenticating via OAuth tokens. But as of next month, the door's open. So if you are a developer and you're interested to start talking to T-Mobile, we'll be able to entertain bringing you in, talking with you, getting set up with some developer credentials, and getting you access to these APIs. That was kind of the high level. I can boil into some basics about how OAuth works. Have any of you guys heard of OAuth? OAuth 2? Oh, a fair number. Oh, okay, so this should be old. This should be easy for you guys. It's fairly simple, straightforward. The user is on the application. We've actually built a device app, but this is a web example. The user's on the browser, and they're trying to access an application. The application is going to offload the authentication provided, right? So they're going to bounce the user through redirects over to our authentication service. We're going to interact with that user, whether that's sending them a sign-in screen, whether that's making sure that they create their account, whether they recover their password, whatever interactions we're going to work with the user, approve consents that the user is granting this application access to their data, and then they bounce back with what's called an authentication code. It's the first layer of the user's authenticated and the permissions they're granted are encapsulated. The next step is, as an application, we're going to authenticate you. So when you're doing your development, these are client secrets that you keep out of the user's browser. And then once you have that token, you can then use it to query the profile. And the data elements within the profile, I've got a slide coming up in a second. You'll see some of the basic elements that we're going to be exposing to you right off the bat. And then you can have any other number of apps, right? So you get single sign-on, you get secured tokens, you get access to what you should be having access to. Okay, so what data? This is what everybody wants to get. So everybody's familiar with Facebook models, Google models. They all use these concepts of scopes. You have to ask for permission to get what you get. We have 4 buckets of permissions to start with. We're going to start with the user profile, very basic data, email address, first name, last name, some very high-level information that, as most application developers, is all you really need. You just want to know that it's a unique user, they're authenticated, they're coming in, and you're going to offer them some sort of service. The next grouping of information is this T-Mobile line data. So this is going to be your traditional data about a phone line, right? So A user account in the first column might have multiple phone lines, so you may get a list of this data. This is the stuff about phone number, MZ, ME, all the other data that's in our database about those phone lines. We have up to 140 different elements we know about every phone line itself, as well as the platform's going to be growing, pulling in data from other sources. So being able to get to data like how many minutes have you consumed, that'll be available in the future as well. We've called out a special billable MISDN as even though the data itself is available separately, we're calling it out so that we can have the user see that as a unique question. Application wants access to your phone number so they can bill you, whether that's a $2 charge you want to stick on their phone monthly, or you're going to send them a ringtone or something like that, right? So we can call that out to the user as a unique thing that's being asked, versus you just want their phone number to complete a profile. And then entitlements is a really cool, interesting part. For some of you that are working with T-Mobile, you may have pieces of the application that you want to build out with logic. So for instance, our visual voicemail has a premium service. Maybe for the first 3 months you're a customer, you get it for free. So you can query the profile, and these dynamic business rules will tell you, currently free, or variables 10 days left in their trial. And we'll go in the back end and compute those data values for you, keeping your client lighter weight on the device. Any questions so far? I know I'm covering a lot of information. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you give an example of where do you see this will be really used by users, or the person who's consuming the OAuth service?
So T-Mobile today has about 30 different applications that we have on the device. And so instead of having each application authenticate a user themselves, think about a tablet, for instance. I buy that tablet. I sign in on the tablet once as a user account. My user account happens to have my phone listed as my MISDN. And now I can check my voicemails for my phone, even though I'm on my tablet. Or I can be on Wi-Fi, and I can access other services like caller name ID, or access my contacts, or get into some other T-Mobile services, or T-Mobile's Wi-Fi calling, for instance. So today, Wi-Fi calling is actually authenticating the SIM card. So when you turn on Wi-Fi calling, it's only working on your one phone. Well, why can't I go to another phone and sign out of your account, sign into my account, and make and receive phone calls? So there's a lot of that authentication layer where we can authenticate that user once, and then we can layer on any number of services we want. Now, our project so far is focusing on building out the enabler, trying to get the platform available. And now that we're almost ready to launch and have it available, now we're going to start coming around looking to get these apps integrated and connected. That answers your question? Great.
Oh, let me get the mic to you so everyone can hear.
Oh, thank you. So how do you prevent multiple sign-ins at the same time? Because that's obviously a security. On the flip side, it's a security risk.
Yeah. So are you familiar with the Android Accounts and Sync Manager? So Android and iOS has some other workarounds. They have a little bit different of a framework, but I'll answer for Android. Android has an Accounts and Sync framework where you can plug in multiple accounts. So if you go to your settings menu, you can look inside your settings and you can see the various accounts you've signed into. So for instance, you can see that you've signed into your Google account, your Facebook account, and you'll see a T-Mobile account there as well. Each application at that layer can choose implementation rules. Our app at that layer is only going to let one account be signed in on the device at a time, but it's not necessarily a security vulnerability to have multiple accounts sign in. So for instance, your Google account, you can sign in multiple Google accounts, and when it comes to your Gmail or calendar app, you then have to pick when you open up that app, and you say, okay, which account is it you want a token for, and we'll go get you that token. So there's some application layer logic that'll sometimes be needed to kind of connect that user experience. Think of the voicemail example again. We're going to get the user to authenticate on the device. The user might have multiple phone lines they've connected to their user account. So that voicemail app now might want to pop up a little screen saying, hey, great, I see Mike is logged in. You've got 4 phone lines. Which of the voicemails do you want to check right now? So we can offer a lot of different experiences that we can't do today. And some of that is around multiple accounts. Does that answer your question? Great. Excuse me. So some of the information I talked, 4 big buckets of data, you'll be able to ask for them. That translates into user experience questions to the user. Some app wants access, do you approve? We also have different kinds of applications. So we have internal applications like the My Account app. Today it only works when you're on the radio network. Well, we'll be able to authenticate the user now when they're on Wi-Fi. We can authenticate them on their tablet to be able to check their phone's minutes. But applications like that are what we call core. They're always going to work, and users won't be able to revoke privileges for those apps. We also have T-Mobile branded apps. So these are going to be things like our visual voicemail app, our caller name ID app, our T-Mobile TV app. They're a part of T-Mobile. They're going to work out of the box, but we might let users turn them off because they could incur extra charging, right? So they're visible for users to kind of control. And then the third bucket of apps is for all those developers out there that want to be able to connect to us and just authenticate a user. The first time you use Pandora or Rhapsody or one of these apps that want to authenticate, it's not branded T-Mobile. So the first time the user is going to have to accept it, but then they also have visibility to revoke those later. Okay, so this is what you guys want to know, right? Android developers, getting into the nitty-gritty. We have both an agent that will install on the phone. We will eventually be preloading on all Android devices that get shipped with a T-Mobile image on them. We also have a helper library. So as an app developer, you have access to download our SDK. That SDK helps perform a lot of the token caching, a lot of the inter-process communication, helps simplify so that all you have to do is focus on get me a token request or get me this user's name. And the helper library knows, okay, first I got to get a token. I know how long the token's valid for. Now I've got to go query this. And being able to handle all that caching for you. And it'll do that through a common agent. By having a common agent, we'll be able to have a common cookie store and a common authentication store. So now one app, the user will authenticate once on their device into the accounts in sync. They'll see there's a T-Mobile account. They'll be able to interact with that account, manage their account. And then all the different applications, multiple applications, each one doesn't have to get the user to authenticate. They're already in. Details for any of those really interested in how we balance this out. There are both under the cover backend intent requests for tokens as well as activity view requests for tokens. Our agent is a fancy web browser. So a bunch of other providers in this space have built their device agent that plugs in, and they use native screens for login credentials. We're going to be using an HTML5-like approach where all authentication content is framed in via web browser. So the user experience is going to be seamless. It'll just look like a native app, but it'll all actually come in over the wire. Let's see. Some of the points for you guys as developers. As an enabler, and I kind of touched on this a little earlier, you guys still get some choices in what you do. You can offer service up front. Think of an example. CNN lets you sign in with a Facebook account, right? So CNN as a website is fully functional even when you're not signed in. And only when you want to do something special on the site do they ask you to go sign in. Versus an alternative approach like Netflix, you don't get anything until you sign in, right? So as an enabler, we're providing the authentication layer, but you get to choose when you want to bounce the user to us and what you do with those results, right? You get to decide the user, we can send you back saying, okay, user Bob's authenticated. He doesn't happen to have a T-Mobile phone number right now, and you guys have the decision of, are you going to offer that person service or not? There's also some best practice guides, and so a lot of this, if you guys are interested in connecting with us, we'll sit down one-on-one with you, take some time, decide how your app works, what's the best data that you want to get access to, what's the best way, and we'll work with you guys to figure out how to make this app work for you. But there's a bunch of simple tips. We're going to have an account, so you want to link to the account or link to their T-Mobile ID. Get out of the practice of recording phone numbers. A lot of what's burned a lot of application developers in the past is they They create an account based off of their phone number, and they store things in their database based off of a phone number. And then people go off and change their phone number, and they can't get back into their account, or you're sending SMSs to the wrong person. So we want to get out of that practice, right? T-Mobile ID helps you move beyond that. Link to the person, not to the phone number. You can query the profile anytime you want if you want to send them a new SMS. Get the latest version of their account, get the latest email address for them. Re-authenticate users. So a lot of you are probably going to authenticate once at the very beginning. You're going to issue your own application token. You're going to interact with that user for several months. But if the user is going to do something like escalate to a new layer of service, rebounce them through authentication. Make sure that it's still the same user. And then minimize your request for access is kind of a general best practice. If you ask for everything on the moon, the user is more likely to say decline the exposure of their profile. Yeah, so a change in service is going to depend on the application you're trying to build. So think of the voicemail example. If you have a basic voicemail user and they're signed in to access their voicemails, you don't need to have the user re-authenticate every time they launch the voicemail app, because you're going to get some sort of credentials for your voicemail connection to the server. But what you can do is if they want to turn on premium voicemail, or they want to switch and check a different voicemail box, or they're changing the service they're trying to receive, then re-authenticate them, verify it's still the same user. Yep. And we have single sign-on, so a lot of the time the user won't even see it. Right? They'll request for an upgrade. You'll ask for a token in the background. You'll get that token, the reissued token. You can confirm those credentials and keep going, and the user doesn't even notice that there was an authentication event. There is one option down here. It's called the sandwich. A lot of apps, a lot of our partners have done Misden insertion. Any of you guys used Misden insertion before? Oh, I'm very glad that's very few of you. It's a very troublesome technology where essentially every time you do an HTTP GET to the internet, T-Mobile sticks your phone number into the header. And so these web pages on the internet just look for this phone number in the header and be like, great, your phone number 555. Walk you right into that account. Obviously very insecure. I call that 1980s off. And so a big part of this project is to get past that. But a lot of our applications still want to work when they're on the radio network and work out of the box. Especially when you buy that new phone, you're on the radio network, you want to turn on that app and start making phone calls. And so we may do something like what we're referring to as kind of a sandwich effect. When you're on the radio network, we're in a secured environment, we can trust the headers, okay, maybe we'll show you the number of minutes you've consumed, but when you actually want to see what your phone bill is, okay, now we'll bounce you through an authentication layer, right? Or let's first check to see if you have tokens. If you're already logged in, great, we'll connect you to that account. Otherwise, now we'll go to the less secure. Now you can just see the number of minutes you've consumed. We'll trust this less security. You want to get deeper, now we'll go into the tokens again and actually ask you to be authenticated versus kind of there's a soft authentication where we just check, see if you can get a token. If the user's already authenticated, you can get a token without anything popping up in front of the user. So this is just kind of my summary slide for those of you that are interested in taking the next step, your first step towards T-Mobile ID. Join the Google Plus group. That's where we're publishing all the latest versions of the agents and the helper libraries. That's where you can get information from us about what are the endpoints and the URLs to connect to. Reach out to me if you would like, or actually we have that Meetup email address if you would like to get more information on actually getting your own developer credentials so you can start bouncing applications through. We'll schedule a meeting with you one-on-one and go through and see how you want to use the data, what data are we going to whitelist you for, and then we'll get it rolling from there. Any questions?
Anton? Let me run over there.
Yep, go ahead. Aaron's trying to run to catch up to you to get to the mic.
So this is only valid for Android. If I want to develop a application, this is running like iOS, Android, or Windows.
Yep.
Is it something that is cross-platform, or it's just for Android for now?
It is cross-platform. So the question he asked was, whether or not this is cross-platform. We have an Android and iOS agent, and then we have an Android and iOS helper library. If you are developing an application for a different environment, you are welcome to continue falling back towards OAuth, right? So we have all of those screens available on web server endpoints. And so you'd be able to do a browser get to the user. So in the event there is not an agent, then the user's signing into each application, right? So if you had a BlackBerry and you wanted them to authenticate, then each app on the phone is going to have to get them to authenticate. They're not going to have a common agent to do that common authentication session, but you can fail back and authenticate. Does that answer your question? Great. All right, well, thank you very much, guys. I will be available if you have any more questions you want to ask one-on-one.
Thank you, Mike.